Yeah. Yeah. What? Yeah. Yeah.
Load it.
Yeah. What? Yeah. 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 What? Yeah. 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 What? Yeah. Yeah.
Y'all. Hey, welcome to Renov8. We miss everyone. And happy birthday, Kat. Kat's birthday's today. Yeah. Hope y'all are all staying safe, 6 feet apart, proper social distancing. Just remember to get outside, get some sunshine. Have a good day. Love y'all. Bye.
Hey everybody, it's Nate. Welcome to Renov8 tonight. I want to start with a couple of announcements tonight. I know a lot of you have been asking me about youth camp. I've gotten a lot of texts. Probably the most texted question that I've received during this time is, what about youth camp? And so I've been telling you all that I don't know yet, but a couple days ago I heard from Falls Creek, and so there's good news. On that front, youth camp has not been canceled for this summer. It has been postponed. And so our typical date is the last week of June, last full week of June, and we're not going to be able to go then. But they have moved our date back to July 19th through 22nd. And so go ahead and mark that on your calendars. There may be a reduced price and all of that. I don't know the details on that just yet, but just understand those are going to be the dates. It'll only be a half-week camp instead of a full week, but that's better than no camp at all. And so our staff prayed about it and talked about it and really felt like that if we can safely take a group to Falls Creek, that we should. And so parents, if you're watching, just understand if there's still regulations in place, we're not going to break the law and we're not going to put anybody in danger. Our campers' safety is of top priority. And so, but as of right now, we are planning to take a group to Falls Creek on July 19th through 22nd, which is a Sunday through Wednesday. And so mark your calendars. If you've already registered, then your registration is still good. If you need to get your money back, if you like, I'm not going to send my kid to camp, you don't have to do that now, but just understand if we end up not going to camp or if you need to back out, you can do that and we'll refund you, of course, all your money. And so that's basically all the announcements I have for the summer. One thing that's coming up right now, though, is we are going to be doing some baptisms at our church in the next few weeks. And I know there's several of you that I've spoken with over the last few weeks and months about baptism. And about your desire to be baptized. And so if that's you, if you have a desire to be baptized in the next few weeks, you need to A, talk to your parents about it, and B, set up a meeting with myself or our Dr. Moody, and we can probably meet with you over Zoom or FaceTime. But we are going to have some baptisms, and we're going to video those so our faith family can see them. And so if that's you, if God has worked in your heart, if you're ready to give an outward picture of the inward salvation that Christ has done in your life, then let me know. We'd love to baptize you the next few weeks. All right, God bless.
Your name is a light that the shadows can't deny. Your name cannot be overcome. Your name is alive, forever lifted high. Your name cannot be overcome. Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus, you silence fear. Oh, Jesus, Jesus, shadows can't deny. Your name cannot be overcome. Your name is alive, forever lifted high. Your name cannot be overcome. Oh, Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Silence fear. Oh, Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus, death could not hold you. The veil tore before you. You silence the boast of sin and grave. The heavens are roaring the praise of your glory, for you are raised to life again. You have no rival, you have no equal, now and forever.
sharing a little bit of my testimony with y'all. So I have amazing parents who put the Lord before everything, and so I did grow up in church and I was saved at a younger age. But growing up, especially getting into like my teenage years, so 13 and 14, I was really insecure. I found that I was comparing myself to everyone, and I kind of had thoughts like, oh, if I looked like her, then I would be happier. Oh, if I dressed like her, then I would be happy. And I was trying to find happiness and joy in all of these like worldly things. And obviously it wasn't working, and I was really just wearing myself down at this point. I started feeling hate for those that I was comparing myself to. I didn't even know most of the people, and I still just felt this way about them, and they just had something that I wanted, and I obviously couldn't find it the way that I was searching for it. And we have this verse on my wall in my house, and it's 1 Corinthians 13:13, and it's faith, hope, and love, but the greatest of these is love. And that verse, every time that I read it, it was just like it meant more to me. And I realized that God doesn't love me for the way that I look or the way that I dress, but he loves me because I'm his child, and it's this joy and it's this peace that you can't find anywhere else. And over time, God started to take all of that hate that I had, not only for myself but for others, and he turned it into love. And yes, sometimes I still do struggle with insecurities, but I just have to remind myself that God is bigger than those insecurities, and I just have to take it all to him. And I'm still growing every day, obviously, like everyone else, but that's a little bit of my testimony. Thank you guys so much for listening.
Can't go back to the beginning. Can't control what tomorrow will bring. But I know here in the middle is the place where you promised to be. I'm not enough unless you come. Will you meet me here again? 'Cause all I want is all you are. Will you meet me here again? As I walk now through the valley, let your love rise above every fear. Like the sun shaping the shadow, in my weakness your glory appears. I'm not enough unless you come. Will you meet me here again? 'Cause all I want is all you are. Will you meet me here again? I'm not enough unless you come. Will you meet me here again? 'Cause all I want is all you are. Will you meet me here again? Not for a minute was I forsaken. The Lord is in
Hey, y'all, we're going to continue tonight with our series of talks through the Sermon on the Mount. And I know that this is a time of fear and anxiety and maybe reevaluating how we even live life. And I think that's appropriate and a timely experience for us to go into God's Word and to look at what Jesus had to say about life. The Sermon on the Mount, especially the series of verses we're about to go into, are really Jesus's take on the law, and the law was an indication of how the people were to live. And so Jesus is going to redefine these laws in light of his own light, which is kind of a weird thing to do, but Jesus is bringing in a new covenant, and he's bringing in a new standard of righteousness, which before the standard of righteousness was set by the religious leaders. And now Jesus is going to come in and set a new standard of righteousness, which is himself, which we looked at last week. He said, I came to fulfill the law, not to destroy it, not to abolish it, right? But I came to fulfill it. And so the new standard for righteousness is 100%. It's holiness, right? It's not, hey, I'm a better human being than other people. It's God came in his own flesh, in the person of Jesus Christ, and established the righteousness as himself. And so he is going to take some very familiar laws of the Old Testament that were frankly good laws, and he's going to kind of flip them upside down a little bit and to redefine them. And so we're going to look at one tonight that's dealing with anger. And I know if you're like me, you might have had some feelings of anger during this time. The last few months, or I guess it may be months now, or weeks at least, I know I've felt times where I've had some real anger, and it's not really pointed towards God or to any one person, but it's a frustration with what's going on, and then that kind of builds up, and it ends up coming out as anger. And so we're going to see today that Jesus said, anger is an outward expression of your heart. He's going to really even say that sin itself, it begins in the heart. We see that echoed and throughout the New Testament, and the book of James says the same thing. But that Jesus is going to say, look, that sin is birthed in the heart, and it's begun there, and it comes out in our lives and through our circumstances. And so maybe anger is a thing that you have to deal with, and it's a thing we probably all have to deal with. A lot of you are probably angry that you're not going to have a senior prom, or that you're not going to have a normal graduation, or maybe your spring sports were canceled, or maybe you're a really great student and now you excelled in a normal classroom, and now you're having to just kind of go on this level playing field with everyone else. There could be so many things that you're upset about. You don't get to see your friends, and that's expected. But we're going to look if there is a righteous anger of God towards sin, but most of the time when we have anger, it's probably directed in a relationship, in our circumstances. And so let's read, if you have your Bibles, or if you want to open the YouVersion app if you're on your computer or laptop or phone. We're going to be in Matthew chapter 5, and we're going to pick up in verse 21. Jesus says this, "You have heard that it was said of old, 'You shall not murder.'" That's the sixth commandment. If you're thinking of the 10 commandments, the sixth commandment is thou shalt not murder. And whoever murders will be liable by judgment. Now this seems pretty cut and dry, right? And this seems like a great law. Thou shalt not murder. You shouldn't kill another human being. I think across the board, across the global sphere of humanity, most people would agree that I shouldn't kill another person. All right, now people still do it, and people convince themselves it's okay or whatever. But in general, if you said, is it wrong to kill another person, most people were going to get on board with this, right? It makes sense. It's pretty cut and dry. But Jesus is going to take it a little bit further. All right, verse 22. He says in verse 21, "You've heard it was said, 'You shall not murder,' and whoever murders will be liable to judgment." Verse 22, he says, "But I say to you that everyone who is angry with his brother will be liable to judgment." Wow. He takes it to a whole nother level. Obviously, most of us have not murdered a person, right? You'd be in jail right now if you did. But I can without a doubt say that all of us have had hatred and anger in our hearts towards someone. And so Jesus is redefining righteousness by his own standard here, saying, look, this was a law in the past. You shouldn't murder. Most of you have done pretty good about this. But I tell you what, if you think you're righteous, let's look inside of your heart, because I know that you've probably hated and you've probably been angry at someone in your heart. And if so, then you're guilty or liable to judgment. And he goes even further. He says, whoever insults his brother will be liable to the council. So if at first we have this unrighteous anger towards a person or hatred, it's probably going to come out in our words. Our words are a reflection of our heart, right? Whatever the heart desires, the mouth is going to speak about. And so if that thing is anger or resentment or judgment, it's probably going to come out in words. And he says, look, if you, whoever insults his brother will be liable to the council. And even further, if you lash out in anger, and whoever says you fool, it's calling someone a fool, calling someone a name, you buffoon, you idiot, right? Will be liable to the hell of fire. And so he has redefined this notion of murder. I could go my life without killing another person in the Old Testament and think that I had a sense of righteousness in this. And Jesus has said, look, your righteousness is not my righteousness. The book of Isaiah, the prophet Isaiah writes about God that his ways are not our ways, and his thoughts are not our thoughts. They're much higher. It's like the sky to the earth, right? His thoughts are that much higher than ours are. And so if we look at this idea of righteousness that Christ has defined by himself, that you and I realize that, hey, we've all been angry in our heart, that we've all probably hated someone in our own heart. And so by this redefinition of the law, then we have committed murder. Jesus is saying murder doesn't necessarily take place out in the society, that it begins and it takes place in the heart. And he's going to say that lust first takes place in the heart, right? And that envy and malice and slander and all of the things that we want to avoid to remain righteous, that those things begin in the heart. And so the reality of this is that what Jesus came to do was not to change our behavior so much. That's not his initial cause. That his initial cause was to come in to change a person's heart. Because if a person's heart is changed, then their habits can be changed. I know every sin that I've struggled with in my life, and anger, frankly, has been one of them in my life, that just trying to control this in my own power, trying to take steps, that can be helpful for a time. But the only way to conquer this sin is by having a changed heart. The only way to conquer any sin, really, and especially addictive sin, is to have a changed heart. And the beautiful thing about Jesus and his gospel is that he came to change hearts. You see, murder is something that takes place in our culture. In our city, Beaumont is a very common place for murder. I read an article that said in Chicago, Illinois, 1 out of every 35 deaths are by murder, and that most of those are a crime of passion. They're not like a premeditated serial killer. Like they already have feelings about this person of resentment or whatever, and it boils over in a fit of anger, and they end up killing them. And I think most murders are that way. And so to see that Jesus is way off, he's not. He's actually on. Because the thing that takes place in the heart first is what leads to what comes out in society. And so Jesus is fundamentally changing God's law to a certain way without really altering it. You see this? He doesn't say, no, you've heard it was said, you shall not murder. That's wrong. He's adding to, he's reinterpreting. He's saying, look, yeah, that's right. You shouldn't murder. But guess what? You actually probably have already committed murder because you've been angry in your heart, because you hated in your heart. It's like when you see someone post something on Instagram, they're giving you a version of what they want you to see. But when you really see that person or that whatever in the real light, then it probably looks a little bit different. And that's exactly what Jesus is doing here. He's shining some light on the reality of his law. You see, I in high school thought I was a pretty good baseball player. And I got the opportunity to play in college. And when I stepped on that field in college, I realized all of a sudden when I compared myself to these other more established, better players, that I wasn't that good of a player after all. And the amount of work that I needed to put in to be like them was going to be huge. Right? When I compared myself to a better standard, then I realized I came up short. And so if my comparison of righteousness is me comparing to others, then I'm going to probably look okay. But when I compare my righteousness to that of Christ, then it leads me to go and realize that I have a need for him. I have a need for his salvation. I have a need for his sacrifice on the cross. And I think a lot of the anger that we have in our own hearts is because we're not at peace. Maybe there's a hard relationship that you have. Maybe your family is just a mess. Maybe your parents are split up. Maybe you've had your heart broken by someone. Maybe right now it's just the COVID-19 scenario we're in where you're a lack of peace. And I understand that. But Jesus came to bring peace. He came so that we could have peace in our heart. And if you can have the peace of God in your heart, having peace with God, right, then you can have the peace of God in your life. I love that. Let me say that again. That the relationship with Christ, it actually brings you peace with God. Let me read this verse to you from Colossians chapter 1, starting in verse 19. It says this, "For in him all the fullness of God was pleased to dwell." That's the person of Christ. "And through him to reconcile to himself all things, whether on earth or in heaven." Get this, "making peace by the blood of the cross." When Jesus died on the cross, he did so to make peace between humanity and God. Right? God and humanity, if you read the Old Testament, they were a constant struggle. Right? There was no peace there. Right? And there was a temporary sacrifice that took place in the tabernacle and in the temple that would put a Band-Aid on that peace. But Jesus came, specifically here it says in this passage, that he came to reconcile all things to himself and to make peace with his blood on the cross. Let me tell you something. If you're struggling with finding peace in your life, that it is offered to you by the blood of Christ. He died on the cross so that you could have peace with him, with God through him. And honestly, tonight, we've given an invitation on all these talks, and I want to offer that again to you. If you need the peace of God in your life, and that comes through knowing Jesus Christ, then you can text the word peace to a phone number that will go to our church staff, to me and our other pastors here. You just text the word peace, P-E-A-C-E, to 409-233-0148. Right? And we'll get that and we'll respond to you, and we'll love to talk to you about how you can have peace through the person of Jesus Christ. And the other thing is, for some of you, maybe you've already known that, but you're hanging on to some anger. It's been said many times that holding on to anger is like drinking poison and waiting on the enemy to die. Right? If I'm drinking poison and thinking that it's going to kill the enemy, when actually it's going to harm me. Holding on to anger and resentment only hurts you. It doesn't hurt the other person. And so maybe this is the time for you to go to God in prayer and say, God, I know that you have the peace for me. I know that you have shown me your peace. God, can you help me to let go of the things that I'm resenting? And some of you, man, you have hard struggles. You have hard lives. I get that. But it's to let it go and to claim the peace of God. That is what we have got to do. And if God loves you and you have peace with him, then you can have peace with others in your relationships. Right? Let's go on. Jesus said earlier, right? He said, "Blessed are the peacemakers," earlier in the Beatitudes. Right? If we hold on to anger, we're not a peacemaker, we're a destroyer, and we're being put into prison. Right? We've been held in check. And so that's our question. Do you have peace with God, and do you have peace with others? Because I believe you must have peace with God first before you can have that true peace with others. Right? That's what I want for you. And I would encourage you, look, if you need to know Christ and you want God's peace, to text the word peace to 409-233-1048. Love you all. Be one, make one.
God of creation, there at the start, before the beginning of time. With no point of reference, you spoke to the dark and fleshed out the wonder of life. And as you speak, a once you have spoken, all nature in silence followed the sound of your voice. And as you speak, 100 billion creatures catch your breath, evolving in pursuit of what you said. If it all reveals your nature so alive, I can see your heart in everything you say. Every painted sky a canvas of your grace. If creation still obeys you, so will I. So will I. So will I. If the stars are made to worship, so will I. If the mountains bow in reverence, so will I. If the oceans roar your greatness, so will I. For if everything exists to lift you high, so will I. If the wind goes where you send it, so will I. If the rocks cry out in silence, so will I. If the sum of all our praises still falls shy, then we'll sing again 100 billion times, so will I. God of salvation, you chased down my heart through all of my failure and pride. On a hill you created, the light of the world, abandoned the darkness to die. And as you speak, 100 billion failures disappear. Where you lost your life so I could find it here. If you left the grave behind you, so will I can see your heart in everything you've done. Every part design a work of art called love. If you gladly chose surrender, so will I can see your heart 8 billion different ways. Every precious one, a child you died to save. If you gave your life to love them, so